We're all buffering.
Buffering.
Oh,
That's funny because I'm melting.
yeah, it's not great pottery weather, is it?
I wish I could share gifts during our meeting because I'd share you this one I sent yesterday. Klaus has already got his hand up. We haven't even called to order yet.
Oh, we can't hear you close if you're talking.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize this meeting is taking place on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, and I know we're also happy and grateful to be here. With that, we'll get underway. We do have two items, I believe, to add to the agenda today under new business. The first will be the updated report that was sent Monday regarding the regional recreation bylaw. And then I believe that Director Salmon wanted to add a discussion regarding the bylaw referendum question. So if there are no other additions to the agenda, I'm not seeing Director Marsh.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, are you talking about to the Committee of the Whole agenda or the whole day's agenda?
Committee of the Whole agenda.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
There's some updates from the province regarding the bylaw itself, and then the referendum question discussion is more fittingly held during Committee of the Whole, and then forwarded to the board for this afternoon's meeting. So with those two additions, seeing no others, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. We're moving on. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Agenda item 2 is the adoption of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting of July 13, 2022.
That's been moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chair, there is no business arising from those minutes. I understand that there is somebody in the public that would like to speak during agenda item number 4, public input period. I see there's other people in the gallery, but they may be part of the delegations. But I know that there was one person that wanted to speak during the public input period.
I believe you just take a step up to the microphone and you have 3 minutes.
Correct.
Just reminding myself. Yes. Good morning and welcome. Just make sure the button on the microphone's pushed and the red light is on. There you go.
Thank you so much. Yes, I appreciate it. Good morning, all. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I wanted to speak directly to the R2 issue on the agenda this morning with regards to Taylor Park. It's with great relief that we hear of the reprieve granted to Taylor Park. Taylor Park was a small parcel of land, forest, that was granted to the CVRD by the Taylor family and was recently slated for being developed into a 100-car park and a bus tour operation. I was recently able to walk the park with Sean Taylor and was absolutely delighted by the ecosystems contained within this tiny gem forest. It is difficult to understand how anybody could have missed the extensive wetlands and series of fish-bearing streams, especially with the posted DFO signs. The fact is that Taylor Park should never have been considered for development in the first place and has caused a great deal of angst for the Taylor family as well as legal fees. There is actually provincial legislation in place called the Charitable Purposes Preservation Act that speaks to the necessity of honoring the purpose for which a donation is made. Recipients cannot simply decide to use donations for another purpose that serves them suits them at that moment, and it has been my experience that the BC Attorney General is particularly interested in actions related to this law. Regardless of this act, it should be a foundational matter of respect and integrity to honor the gift and the purpose for which it was given. You accepted the Taylor's gift of a park and issued a tax receipt for it. You should have kept your word. In the interest of the community, I would like to request a list of all donated lands, funds, etc., that have been gifted to the CVRD and the use to which these donations have been put. I would also like to ask the board when you will have a donations protocol in place to ensure that these gifts are protected on behalf of the donors and the community. The crux of the matter is that no one will ever again give land, money, or anything else to an organization that will not honor the purpose of that donation. It is my hope that Taylor Park is never again considered for anything other than the park as granted by the Taylor family. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, this is public input we can hear, but this is not a question period or a debate, so just thank you for your words and your input. Thank you. Any others for public input this morning? Any online?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I believe that means we are moving on.
Moving on to Section 5 of the agenda, delegations. The first, you have two delegations. The first delegation is from Tourism Cowichan Society with regards to their the Tourism Cowichan Society 2022 update. And I know that there's somebody online, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else in the gallery from TBI.
Yeah, Ken Bailey from Tourism Cowichan Society.
Okay, so both online, none in-house.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So you have 10 minutes for your presentation, delegation, so please go ahead when we're ready here. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, okay, thank you. Good morning. And first, let me thank you for having both Karen and I to present this morning. We're pretty excited to, coming out of the last 2 years, we're excited to, just talk about the good things, not necessarily all the negative things that we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the ancestral lands of the Malahat Nation and quite proud to be working with Malahat Nation at the Malahat Skywalk, of which I'm also the general manager. And very proud to be working with all the Indigenous communities that we work with in the community. So both on the board and in private enterprise. Firstly, I just wanted to quickly let everybody know that, Tourism Cowichan Society is an actual society. We're registered under the Society Act. We have a board. We act, we act with the professionalism and interest that any society would act with. We have fiduciary responsibilities, that sort of thing. And I think it's important for this group to know that we have a fairly, I'm very proud of the board that we have. We have a board that represents a number of different communities and businesses and interests within the CVRD, and I think we've done a good job. I mean, we're about to bring on Brentwood College as a board member as well. One of the things the board has tried to do in the last little while is make sure that our board is representative of the tourism interests and the visitor economy in the area and things like that. And I think that I think we've been able to achieve that, and we'll continue to evolve our board. So it's reflective of what the visitor economy and the CVRD represents. Top line, our goals and objectives. I mean, our strategic priorities are, these are very high level. They're taken from the MRDT business plan, which is our 5-year business plan that we work on in collaboration with the CVRD. And I mean, tourism in general has evolved and changed a little bit, where it's not necessarily revenue driven exclusively. It's driven around collaboration and visitor experience. One of the things that comes from Destination BC as a priority is destination development, and what that means is making sure that we're creating infrastructure and we're creating sustainable, sustainable foundation for tourism. I think the one important thing that the board recognizes is that tourism is going to continue to increase, whether people are happy with that or not. It will continue. The world's getting bigger. The population of the world's getting bigger. People are traveling more. And I think from our perspective from the board, it's important to recognize that. And it's important to work in collaboration with all the different, all the different interest groups within the community to make sure that we're as a group and as business leaders, we're developing something that's sustainable and looking ahead 5 years, 10 years from now, not just next year sort of thing. So, and I think that I had mentioned it, that we have, I'm really proud of where the society and where we as an industry have come over the last couple of years. I mentioned that we've come out of a fairly challenging period. I mean, there's no industry there was no industry that was impacted by COVID, like the tourism industry or the visitor economy, if you will, restaurants and hotels and anything that's customer facing. And I think that, organizations, I'll point out, 4VI as an example, developed an incredibly forward-thinking tourism resiliency program. Tourism Cowichan, the board and the group, spent a lot of time working with the businesses that were in the community and understanding their needs and making sure that we were helping them through. And I think that, the future's bright. I think that there's a lot of opportunity. There was a lot of learning that we had that came out of the last 2 years, a lot of challenges. But I think out of those time periods, out of those trying periods, comes opportunity. And I think that as a board, and as an industry and as a region, I think Cowichan Valley and the CVRD area is poised for some pretty good things. And I hope that, wish that we're able to work on that collaboratively with everybody within the region, because there's some good things on the horizon. I think what I'll do now is I'm going to turn it over to Karen from 4VI, and Karen's going to go through the strategy and a lot of the actions that we've taken over the last year, but more importantly, what we're looking at focusing on over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you everyone for this opportunity to speak. I'm hoping that you can see my slide presentation that I've been toggling through. If anyone can give me a thumbs up, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so I want to speak to some of the more specific activities that Tourism Cowichan has been going through over the last year and a half-ish, as well as some of the things that we're also working on going forward. The pillars for long-term success that we've identified in the Cowichan region, these come from what we understand and as an organization to be what a destination management organization looks like when it's fully successful. And we believe that when the visitor economy is fully successful, it meets exactly the needs of the residents. That's really what this is about, is improving the life of residents through an economic driver like tourism. But keeping those things in balance is very crucial. I think we've seen that, and it's been amplified through COVID-19. So our commitment first and foremost is to meaningful engagement with the industry as well as the community, and that takes a lot of work and time. My colleague Martina Morgan, who is a key point of contact for Tourism Cowichan, is out in the Cowichan region regularly, committing to about 40 in-person meetings every 2 months. That's an extensive amount of industry engagement that's been completed. And really the point of that is to increase relevance, to understand the needs of businesses, as Ken said, and be able to pivot and make programming appropriate. But it's also about connecting them back into the industry, and that includes programs that Destination British Columbia has created to support businesses, as well as those that 4BI has created, like the Tourism Resiliency Program. We're also committed to improving the desirability of the Cowichan region. That speaks to creating an environment for new investment, but also for businesses to increase their product and their product availability. And the key there is balance, of course, the supply and demand equation, such that you're building out the need months and need geographical areas to not overwhelm the system.
While you change slides, I just want to give you a reminder, about a minute and a half left.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll go fairly quickly through some of the stakeholder contacts that we have completed. As I said, about 40 every 3 months, one-to-one engagements, including the business walks we've completed with CVRD staff in 3 communities to date, Lake Cowichan, Shawnigan Lake, as well as Cobble Hill, and one-to-one meetings, as well as we did a biking roundtable recently, which brought those people within that community together to talk about synergies. And we're working to overall increase the amount of leads that are going directly to businesses, which is our primary metric of success. We've also currently invested in market research, which for us is understanding the ideal consumer and being able to speak to them specifically, which speaks to efficiency of spending as well as efficiency of converting to businesses. So we're working on a new brand, and this is the first iteration of it. We found through some of our early research that the diversity of offerings in the Cowichan region is not well understood. And so we're working through a concept like Get Curious About Cowichan, which is an opportunity to highlight some of the maybe lesser known activities like marine. We've invested in RV partnerships as well as golf partnerships most recently. I'll skip through the video because we don't have time, but I want to show you also that we have a partnership with the BC Bird Trail, which is another example of looking for new destination drivers to welcome people here. Marketing initiatives, I won't go through all of those. There are some different ways of presenting the Cowichan opportunities through traditional and digital media. And then translating that into some content. And we are redoing the website to be able to provide more conversion again to the businesses. We model our plan on the Destination BC Captivate, Activate, Generate cycle. And that really is, how do you captivate the interest of a potential visitor? We choose the alignment with the Destination BC brand to do so. And then how do you...
Karen, I have a couple folks here willing to make a motion to extend because your time is up. That's been moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Manhas. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Please continue, and then we'll go back to the video because we all want to watch it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Activate speaks to driving active consideration and planning. And again, I just want to emphasize the importance of seasonal and geographical dispersion. That means as we're doing these engagements and business walks, we're building out blog and image and video content as well. We've recently, our photographer has been on Thetis and Saltaire to capture some image assets. And that just allows us to, again, market those geographical areas more effectively. And we're generating leads to businesses, which is our primary metric of success. I also want to emphasize that, as our digital landscape changes continually, Google, Facebook, all of those powers that be changing their algorithms, we have really needed to invest in building our own leads. So email marketing as a tactic, for example, because as those changes come into effect, it limits your ability to market to consumers if you don't own some of your own leads. And I mentioned the improvement of website UX, which is about the movement along the path to purchase. And then advocating for the visitor experience, we recognize the importance that the visitor centers also play in the visitor journey. And so trying to find more opportunities to partner with those organizations that operate the static and mobile visitor servicing in the region, just to be able to provide them with content. Maybe it's printed content, maybe it's familiarization opportunities for their staff, but also going beyond that to some of the hotels and some of the other partners. We're working on frontline staff training as an initiative. In the meantime, because it's the summer season, it's too busy for many of the staff, we've been working on some tent cards and signs with QR codes to help people refer people to things to do, which again supports geographical dispersion because it encourages people to point to other lesser known activities perhaps that have greater capacity. I flew through that, but I will go back, as you said, because you wanted to see the video. So thank you. I hope that it works. And then just give me 1 second, because I will.
It seems we lost you. Oh, we are back. Okay, try it again. Yeah, I have a feeling it's working on your end, but not ours. It's just a frozen picture of the mountain on our side. We heard the sound for a moment and then it froze.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay.
Just even if you could put a link to it in the chat or something, then we can view it at another time. Mr. Manhas, Director Manhas.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe if we can get everybody to turn their videos off to get some bandwidth, maybe that might work.
We could try that. So if everybody wants to turn off your video, we'll let Karen take another shot at it, and then if it doesn't work, we'll put the link in the chat. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to work. So no worries, we lost it again, but I want to thank you, and I'll turn it over to the board, the committee for discussion or questions. So I'll wait for everybody's cameras to come up and look for some hands. I got Director Salmon, Director Morrison, Director Acton. Okay, I'm gonna have to make a list, so keep your hand up until I call your name. It's almost everybody. So this is gonna be a long period of questions. So I had, Director Salmon, Morrison, Acton, and keep your hand up. Nicholson, Yanni DiNardo, and Smith, Manhas.
Mr. Chair, due to time, I'm willing to take my name off and I will connect with Karen later.
Okay, and then myself at the end. I'll keep you on there just in case somebody might ask your question, so maybe we'll be lucky. But we do have a long agenda, so let's try and make our questions concise. Over to Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I might ask you questions, Sarah. But yeah, thank you, Ken and Karen. That's very good. Just a question about social media. How big a part of your marketing do you find the blogs and everything? It's funny I asked partly because that image that we got stuck on the mountain there, Mount Baldy and Shawnigan, and even your first image of the swing on Mount Baldy. I often hike there, and if I meet someone, which is most times, I always ask them how do they find out about it, because they're never local, and it's always through social media. So just wondering what you think of how big a factor is that these days?
Yeah, it's very large in a number of perspectives. One would be the ability to buy advertisements on social media platforms with a lot of effective spending, because you can monitor it and change it on a daily basis, which is something, we just didn't see with print and broadcast. And then the other aspect of it is the younger demographics in particular, and in some cases, those are the ones that have, proven to be most mobile during COVID-19 and beyond. they have a lot of their lives are on social media, and they're looking to their friends for recommendations. And we all know that word of mouth is the most powerful type of recommendation.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Second follow-up?
No follow-up.
Oh, okay, great. Moving on, Director Morrison.
Thanks, and I'm not sure which one of you will want to take this, and I'm going to be that annoying director that's going to ask you about stuff that's not in your report, but I'm sure you're going to expect it. In regards to the short-term accommodation, you know, there's part of the MRDT is paid by some of the more established providers, and we're struggling. We're struggling as a regional district because we've got people that are making investment purchases in electoral areas that are taking properties that have been traditional rental, affordable rental housing stock and are exclusively going to short-term rental markets. And this is a real challenge. It's hollowing out our communities in that we're you know, we don't have the families moving into community, we don't have the volunteer firefighters and the likes. So there's been recent developments that are I think exacerbating the situation, in that the speculation tax is now being implemented in the municipalities within our regional district, which just means the flight of capital out of the boundaries of municipalities into the electoral areas. And we're seeing it already. So I wish you all the success. I think you've got a great plan here, but we've also got the flip side of the coin, where the more successful you are and the greater the influence of short-term rentals, the more difficult it's going to be to have complete sustainable communities. So I don't need a full answer today, and we can connect offline, but any discussion, any thoughts around the short-term rental market? I bet you the MRDT portion is going to increase as far as a component of your revenue. And the other side of the coin, and I'm glad that you've got hotel representation, you know, how are we going to attract new hotel investment in our communities when there's that uncertainty of the short-term rental market and probably our improperly zoned properties? Thanks.
Karen, do you want me to start?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think there's a couple different things. One, at the board level, we talk about this all the time. It's a topic of conversation because you know, many of our board members are affected by short-term rentals. They're also affected by illegal short-term rentals and in the areas of enforcement and things like that. So I guess the one thing, wearing my tourism Cowichan hat, I would say is that we're very open to any conversations that the group wants to have. We recognize, I mean, it's not exclusive to the Cowichan region. This is going on everywhere. And I don't think there's necessarily a silver bullet solution to this, outside of, if we don't talk about it openly and we don't collaborate on it, then it becomes a robbing Paul to pay Peter kind of situation. And I don't think that's sustainable in the long run. If I may indulge you for a second and wear my Malahat Skywalk hat for a second, as an entity that has invested $18 million in the region, and as a source of employment and tourism, things like that, I think it's very, very important for the leadership of the area to, you know, and I want to say this respectfully, but not to get caught in the rabbit hole of the short-term rental and look for the longer-term solutions, which is the foundation and the sustainability of tourism and things like that. And what I mean by that is I think that the short-term rental thing is something that needs ultimate attention. It needs attention right now, but at the same time, I believe that we need to be working with we have Mandy Farmer, who is the president of Accent Inns, as an example. She lives 35 minutes down the road. She just built a hotel in Tofino, right? I mean, there are entrepreneurs out there. You know, we have an investment group that just spent $18 million in the area. there are investor groups that are interested in the area. I think that it becomes a matter of maybe putting together a group, almost like a junket to go and start to talk to these business groups, because it's going to take 3 to 5 years before we see anything change. But in the absence of long-term hotel properties, the short-term accommodations are just going to continue to put pressure. So I don't think it's one or the other, but I think that we need a longer-term strategy around bringing in those larger properties, or the short-term rental pressure isn't going to go away. I hope that answers the question.
Director Morrison, you got a follow-up? Are you good? Thank you. I do have you, Director Acton, next. Did you want to continue or pass?
Okay, I'll go. It's hard for me to stay quiet. Thanks for being here today. I guess I just wanted to highlight the fact that the Kinsel Trestle is in Shawnigan Lake, and of course it is highly commoditized by Vancouver Island, Tourism Vancouver Island, Tourism BC. And the community is really grateful for that, because we've always believed that in order to protect this beautiful place that we have, we need to share it. So we're able to offer this experience. But on the flip side, we also have extra challenges, extra wear. I guess what I'd like to see is more collaboration with electoral areas and understanding our struggles, because we have the Skywalk that has just come in, and this is a high-end product, and the Trestle's being promoted as a high-end product as well, except you come off the highway, West Shawnigan Lake Road, and the beginning part is well paved for all of the dump trucks, which is interesting. And then the rest of the community suffers because we have horrid roads all the way to the Trestle on both sides. Portions on one side and then on the West Shawnigan Lake Road. So it's a kind of a misrepresentation, and we are very grateful to have the Trans-Canada Trail. So there are benefits when tourism comes to the community. We get to use that facility, and the businesses are supported further, because they wouldn't survive without outside support as well. But it would be really. And we're currently going to the minister at UBCM to encourage some repaving in those areas based on the trestle. But I think just the impacts to communities, and it's finding a way that we can kind of work together more, so that we don't just promote something without delivering that experience that the visitor wants and the community wants. So I guess I'm just looking to you to collaborate with CVRD more, and can we support each other so that we can get some of these other projects done?
If I can, from a board perspective, absolutely. I mean, we would encourage that. In the time that I've been with the Tourism Cowichan board, we have never been approached for a letter of support. We have never been approached to say, can you guys write something to the minister, because this is an initiative we're trying to put forward. Yet we're a group of business leaders and influencers within the community. So I would, I hope, and part of this conversation is meant to do that, is to say we're not without our blemishes. Everybody, we all know that we have our things that we need to pay attention to and improve on. But as a board, I speak for everybody on the board. Our recognition is that we're not going to be able to grow tourism on our own. We're only going to be able to grow it with collaboration and with involvement from the community, which we all live in. We all have kids. We all pay taxes. We all go to school. So we recognize the pressures that are on some of these smaller communities, and are very much encouraged to have those ongoing conversations and increase the pressure points where we can, and influence the different ministers where we can. I mean, in some instances we only have so much influence, and then in others we have greater influence. So So we're more than happy to do that. I think that the most important thing for you guys to realize is that we recognize that we know that we talk about that all the time, and over tourism is very much a risk of a successful tourism program. And we recognize that. We know that that's there, and we need to pay attention to it.
Thank you. So if I could just have a quick follow-up.
Quick follow-up, please.
Yes, thank you. So I have connected with Tourism Vancouver Island, and I have requested some data. And so it seems like that data is not there. Perhaps, moving forward, you could collect information. Like, I wanted to get a better sense of how much is the trestle being promoted for our region and for BC. And then so that we have that kind of data to fall on that can support us. So perhaps, we could talk further on what kind of matrix we can look at that would support supporting the community.
Yes, I'm happy to reach out to you after, perhaps.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And just a reminder to our directors and our delegation, if we can make our questions and answers as concise as possible. We have a long meeting and a long list on my speakers list here. So I've got directors Nicholson, Yanni DiNardo, Smith, Manhas, Marsh, and myself. If I missed anyone, please raise your hand, but it's over to you, Director Nicholson.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. It was great. I am interested in product, and I just wanted to mention that in my area, we have Keating Farm, which is just a fabulous asset to the valley as far as agritourism goes. And Rebecca's very interested in helping us, and I think maybe there are other people that are part of your association that should maybe clue into the fact that we're modernizing our OCP, and there are really some things that probably can be done to make sure that the CVRD regulations and zoning and so forth are supporting the right kind of product development in the valley. So I would really encourage you to contact our senior planner who's managing that, who is Coralie Breen, to make sure that you don't miss an opportunity there, because it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo next, and then Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I do appreciate Director Nicholson's comment on that we do need to have that added to our OCP. But my other question is, Tofino has managed to resolve, or to a certain extent, the short-term rentals. They have a percentage or whatever. Is that not something? Is that something has worked well in Tofino?
I can provide some information about Tofino if you're interested. There's actually a number of examples across the province of ways that regional districts or municipalities have chosen to tackle the short-term rental issue. For one of the examples that Tofino has worked on is using the OAPs towards bylaw enforcement. So that's the understanding that they're probably going to crop up and exist. We have to figure out how to coexist, and so bylaw enforcement means that at least the people that are existing, there's some kind of framework for which they can exist in Tofino. Have they solved their short-term rental problem? Absolutely not. The problem is so complex and so difficult. It's going to take a number of organizations and ministries and all of you and all of us working together to try to find some reasonable solutions.
Thank you. I just have did I hear Mr. Bailey say that Brentwood College is a board member?
They're coming on as a board member.
So Brentwood College offers tourism?
Well, what they do is they have events, right? They have their regatta, and they have both of the private schools in the area have large scale events. Large scale events have impact on tourism and the coffee shops and the restaurants and things like that. And one of the things that we've talked about as a board is making sure that we're in tune with those. Because all of a sudden the regatta shows up in Mill Bay, and it has an enormous positive impact on Mill Bay. Outside of a placard that they put outside the school, nobody knows that they're coming. So from a tourism DMO perspective, if we're marketing something, we would avoid marketing around that time period. if we're aware of that.
Thank you so much. We also did a business walk at Cowichan Bay Village as well that was very successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Director Smith, and then Director Manhas following her.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's always interesting to see how many amazing areas we have in the Cowichan Valley. As a cyclist, I'm always looking for possible routes to survive on to get to some of these places. And I think that's an area that we need to have a little more as we're working through our active transportation, that maybe tourism, Cowichan could also look at being part of our active transportation to make sure that we can get to some of these places on our bicycles or walking as a pedestrian or a cyclist and enjoy it at zero emissions would be great. And I'd also like to thank the opportunity of going to Thetis Island and Saltaire and participating and bringing them into the picture here. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Manhas and then Director Marsh.
I'll try to keep it brief, Chair, and thank you, Ken and Karen, for your presentation. Certainly, the Malahat Skywalk is a world-renowned and world-class facility. I know the first time my wife and I went and toured it, went up there, we actually ended up buying seasons passes and we've been back 3 or 4 times since each. So, and I'd also like to see, happy that see Aaron Hamilton from Lake Cowichan First Nations involved. I've had personal interaction with Aaron in the last little while. We're working on some stuff together, and he's really keen on building and recognition for the Lake Cowichan area, and I think they got a lot to offer. I think the question was answered more or less about why Brentwood College is coming on board and why not VIU. So that's my question. Why is not VIU coming on board and Brentwood colleges?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. It more was a conversation that we started to have with Brentwood that came out of the regatta. And their impact. I mean, Shawnigan also has a significant impact when they have things going on, and it wasn't meant to not include anybody. I think it was just more, or that opportunity organically evolved at the time.
Thank you, Director Marsh, and then hopefully myself to close, but I'll watch for other hands. Director Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I just wanted to, a lot of the things that were asked were things I was thinking about. I just wanted to let Director Acton know that I believe Cowichan Biodiesel, which is at the Malahat Industrial Park, has a road coating product that might be an interim solution, because we all know that the province doesn't move too quickly. And for Director Smith to know that North Cowichan is working on the master transportation plan with a big focus on not cars and cross sections that are connectivity for people and wildlife. But so I'm just going to end by saying I really, really appreciated your presentation, the obvious work you've put in during the pandemic to pivot and swivel and draw people back in. And I loved the inclusivity of your images. It was really subtle but obvious and really made me feel proud of the region. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll let that one sit for a sec because that was nice. Maybe I should just end it there, but I'm going to ask a quick question. Anyone who's been around the Tourism Cowichan Society knows that I'll ask this at every meeting until I feel like it doesn't need to be asked anymore. But it was notable during the board presentation, the geographic diversity or lack thereof in the board representation. It's nice to see, as Director Manhas noted, some board members from the West, but it is and always has been seemingly very centric to the South and the core of Cowichan, with little participation north of Chemainus or even Duncan area. And that, I think, is reflected and I'm very thankful for the inclusion of more images from the north, more things about Chemainus, the assets in Chemainus and Ladysmith. But it would be nice to see if there could be some continual outreach for new board members from the north. I'm going to say it because I always do. Second/third highest contributor in funding through the CVRD to this service is the town of Ladysmith. And the town of Ladysmith municipally puts 6 figures every year into our own tourism initiatives to fill what we see as a gap in the services provided by Tourism Cowichan. So app development, walking tours, the contract we have with the Chamber of Commerce up there is all to help fill in what we see as gaps in what's being offered by Tourism Cowichan, and complementary, to be sure. And I don't think that investment would ever go away, but I know they're quite happy with the connection and engagement, but I know that in talking to some of the businesses in our area, they don't feel as connected. They're not critical of the efforts. They're really thankful. The branding is fantastic. The organization's clearly very well run, but just finding a way to feel more connected and engaged with the board and the organization would be really appreciated, sort of north of Herd Road, Lake Cowichan Highway, if you will. So I'll leave it at that. And with all compliments, nobody asks to be more involved unless they're really impressed with the product and the work that's being done. So please take it as a compliment. But the more you knock on our doors, the happier we'll be up in Chemainus Ladysmith area. So thank you so much. I think it's time for a virtual clap. Doing fantastic work. I love the new brand. I think it speaks to the maturity of your organization, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Wow.
Sorry, folks. I apologize. I was trying to move it along. I just saying to our delegation, I apologize. They're all here and being so patient and so attentive to what we're working through. We're going on to D2. Over to you.
That's correct. Delegation from the Coalition for Sustainable and Affordable Housing. I believe they're in the gallery. It was noted in their submission that they had a PowerPoint, but I understand that there is no PowerPoint today. And so we invite the representative from that group.
Please come up to the lectern. The microphone is on for your convenience. And you do have 10 minutes. Of course, we can extend if necessary, but the questions aren't part of your 10 minutes, so feel free to use it as you see fit. Welcome.
Thank you. Can I move this over just to put my notebook up here? There we go. Great. Thanks for meeting today and having us here. My name is Cody Wicks, and speaking today on the need for affordable housing, which I'm sure is no foreign conversation for all of you at this point. First, I just want to appreciate the land acknowledgement that was done at the beginning, and my own appreciation for Cowichan and the Halkominum language speaking people that steward this land. It's one thing I'm curious about here today is who's done the Journey of Our Generation workshop with the Cowichan. For me, that's a very good beginning for land acknowledgement in a more embodied sense, and something I really encourage everyone to do in all levels of government, and would really love to see that, to see our CVRD council and staff and people in our community taking those workshops and learning in that way. And I think it would also help inform kind of some of the things we'd like to talk about today. Yeah, there's a few things I'd love to talk about. My background's in sustainable design and community development. I have a degree and a number of certificates from SFU in labor studies and sustainable community design and sustainable community development. What we've been exploring here, so it's a bit funny having some of you in person and some online, so I'm trying to figure out where to look. But I'll look mostly at the people that are here, so thank you.
If you see yourself on the camera, everybody's looking at you just like we're looking at each other. So
great, okay.
Don't feel awkward, just...
Yeah, thank you. The main reason I'm here today is first step. There's a lot I could say, and I could probably talk for hours, and I get that these tend to go on. So I'm curious if there's a couple requests, and there's one that that's really the foundational one to get started with the delegation today. And that's the request for the CVRD to officially declare a housing emergency. I'd say most of us can acknowledge at this point there's a housing crisis, and I heard it come up in the previous delegation around tourism and affordable housing and the different tensions between those. In some ways, at least temporary solution is in our backyards right now. From what I can see and the last few years, having talked to hundreds of people and having dozens come together to talk and explore what we can do as a grassroots kind of citizen-led group, because there is no lobby group for a lot of these things, for the people that want just a safe place to live or an affordable place to live. And so it's tricky, and a lot of the people that would like to be here today are working, raising kids, moving because they've been evicted from their home, trying to find a home, trying to provide homes for people. A lot of landowners here in the valley would really like to provide homes for people. And so I guess as part of a housing emergency, one thing that comes up right away is an immediate set of focuses. Something that Salt Spring Island has led on recently, because they are kind of further down the road of housing crises, and same with places like Tofino, although they haven't taken this step, is to simply create a temporary stop to evictions due to zoning bylaws. These are people living in tiny homes, RVs, vans, older cabins. There's people living in homes that have been there for 50 years that are getting evicted because they're not technically permitted, even though they've been lived in for that long. Often coming from different reasons that these things get initiated. So Salt Spring did that recently. I sent the link to that to council and can send that again. And then with the focus on health and safety, so it's not about throwing those things out, it's about supporting people to live in the meantime so that there aren't as many people living down at the river or down on the roads, and just trying to find a place and that sense of insecurity that comes from that space. There's families that are homeless right now in this valley, and also some that had to move to Alberta and otherwise across the country and uproot their entire lives, pull their kids out of school, and they would have loved to have been here. This conversation started around a couple of those families, and now they're gone. They've left our valley, and they were really solid, positive members of this community. They held events, they held dances, they worked in the community, they volunteered in the community. They were really active members of the community. So. Yeah, and then I guess in the immediate term, another request for today would be to start, and I know there's probably a committee of some sort that's focused on this, but starting or adapting a committee or an action group, which I believe is what Salt Spring did initially, was start an action group to create action items on how to address this crisis, both for research and development, but also immediate and short-term pieces. In the short term, so that's immediate. There's a few, and there's much that could be explored in that and developed on. In the short term, looking at new zoning for these modern times. I heard, from the tourism group about the dynamic tension between tourism and housing, and then part of the solution sounds like it is to bring in larger scale tourism developments, and I appreciate that. But on this end, what I think is needed is, and that with the OCP process underway, is zoning that accounts for this need right now, and that accounts for tiny homes, that accounts for people that are living in non-traditional family constellations, or there's a lot of people who are adults at this point who are living on the land together because that's the only option that's left to them. As well as the need, especially to meet kind of modern costs. People who want to farm often can't afford a farm because if under a single family or even a two-family dwelling zoning, it's just not realistic for people to be able to pay their mortgage and work the land, especially if they're doing sustainable and organic practices. They're not using pesticides, chemical fertilizers as much, and it makes it much more challenging. So in some ways, just wanting to map out how housing and this crisis is not just mapped to housing, it's also connected to a lot of these other things that come up. And I know you all meet with a lot of amazing groups that focus on agriculture. I know the Young Agrarians is doing amazing work. But even a lot of those people who have leased farmland have ended up moving some over as far as across the entire country because they couldn't find housing. And then those farms go back to fallow. So just finding how much these are all connected. And then, of course, there's medium and long-term solutions, which I think are being explored right now by council and by other municipalities in the area, such as a focus on developing more co-ops, legalizing tiny homes, or trying to figure out how to resolve that situation, which I know also goes back to the province and building codes. New alternative zonings, small-scale cabin development, and there's a lot of different things that could be and I'm sure are being explored in that, and that's really important as well. But the main focus for me today is this immediate need to declare a housing emergency and then use the municipal powers that exist to talk with the provincial and federal governments and bring in the resources and support that's needed, as well as these kind of at least temporary mandates to stop the evictions that are happening right now in this valley. I've talked to dozens of people that are either facing active eviction because it's for those zoning-based reasons. Yeah, and like I said, it's not just about housing. Really part of an ecosystem here. And a lot of people who are trying to do things for local resilience, things that people that want to do affordable housing, sustainable forestry practices. A lot of these types of projects need more people to have the affordable housing so that they can focus on these solutions. So I could go on, I'm just noticing the time, and would just like to bring it back to my request for council today, or our request to start, is that request to declare a housing emergency at least, and then ideally with some extra resolutions around figuring out at least temporary mandate to stop evicting people who are living in tiny homes, RVs, and cabins, and focus on health and safety instead. And to start an action group to develop that policy and to move things forward in a faster way because our community needs it. Yeah, I'll end there for now. Like I said, I could go on. What I'll end with is a quote from Cowichan Knowledge Keeper that I reached out to and asked about this. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, but Cowichan Yuxton. Said, when stolen land sells for a landowner for millions of dollars, and yet the true owners of this land die of conditions related to homelessness, we have a problem. And I just want to acknowledge that and the lived experience in that. And that those that are most challenged by the system tend to be the most disadvantaged by some of these issues. And that includes many other aspects of our community here in society. So thanks for listening, and yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Cody. I'll go to the board in just a minute. Just a couple of notes. The board here and councils are kind of different legislation, different capabilities. I would very much just off the hop encourage you to go visit each municipality. North Cowichan's coming close to concluding some important work around their OCP, which includes housing policy, transportation policy. Town of Ladysmith is doing the same. I can't speak for Lake Cowichan, perhaps a representative, but the land use decisions that are made at this table are only for the electoral areas, not the municipalities. So I'd really encourage you to bring that presentation that you've just done to each of the municipalities as well, because frankly, in many ways, we have the ability to move more quickly. We have powers that the local government at a regional level does not have. And many of us are moving on things like rent evictions, we've passed bylaws. I believe North Cowichan has done the same to try and protect people as best we can. But just to frame that conversation, I very much encourage all of you to come to the municipalities and make that same, because this group here can't make those decisions or form those policies for the individual municipalities, and we all have our different ins and outs that need to be dealt with. Just a quick note, I know most of us have either been through one of the Understanding the Village programs, or then it was called The Village. This sounds similar. It takes a village, but we always continue to engage with the First Nations throughout Cowichan. And I know most of us here, I could probably say unanimously, are honored, and also it's really important to us to continue to develop our understanding of both the history, the present, and the future of the nations here and support that work. And just a little piece around the delegations policy. We don't make any decisions based on a delegation, so I would encourage you to follow up this delegation with a letter that highlights your requests, both your immediate, mid, and long term, because then it can come back as a piece of correspondence and we can actually debate and decide what resources we have. It's short-term left in our term here. It's October as local government elections, and I know we're all pushing really hard to finish OCP amendments and things like that will hopefully help some of these things, but please get that letter, and it can end up on correspondence for our next meeting, and then we can debate it more fully. Today, though, you'll get questions from our board, and I just got to say again, excellent presentation, and I don't think you'll find an unsupportive member of this board or the councils that hopefully you'll visit soon. Starting the speakers list, I have Director Morrison and then Director Wilson, and I'll watch for hands on my screen and write those down. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Cody and crew, for attending today. I think you're, as our chair has mentioned, you're preaching to the converted. I know that, and thanks for setting the table the way you did. There are some things that are underway. The development approval process review at the provincial government has sort of been mandated amongst local governments. It's a really tough question. It's multifaceted. I think we're doing what we can. We're also hearing from the neighbors that don't want to see that kind of change as well. So, we have the tension on both sides. I'm a landlord. I know that if I were to have a tenant leave right now, my rent would double. Just, that's what the market says, and that's in Cowichan Lake. So it's a tough one. And we also have construction projects where there's going to be people coming into this community that are going to be quite well paid, that are going to be competing for those same accommodations. So I looking at the information that came with your delegation request, that, I'd be prepared to make a motion that this be referred to staff for a report back and with what's in there, or we can go the route that the chair has suggested as well. But a good presentation. I think the chair's made some good suggestions, and I think we're all in this together, and it's about talking to one another. And just one note in this regional district, we have some Nutchelness folks as well. So there you go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Cody, or are you happy to hear the words from Director Morrison?
I think that's good.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I have Director Wilson and then Director Marsh. If I missed you, please raise your hand. Okay. Got you, Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Cody. Good stuff. And I do acknowledge that we have a serious situation here, and that's been highlighted in the last couple of weeks with the situation. I think it's Allenby Road by the side of the Cowichan River, with long-term renters there, and on the TV last night in a similar situation in Souk, all through zoning. And it's something which you've rightly pointed out needs to be looked at. I'm sure you have, but have you been working with Cowichan Housing Association and the funds that they have available to them as well?
Yeah, we have reached out.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Marsh, you're next, then Director McGonigal.
Thank you. Hi, Cody. Thank you so much for so many years of advocating and building community. I just wanted to suggest to you a couple of things. It sounds like you're building a coalition of numbers. It would be good if they could each bring 3 in. And I would suggest you would maybe write to the former Minister of Housing and Attorney General, David Eby, who's taking this very seriously, and ask him, with a petition perhaps, to change the building code to allow tiny homes. And then I would think, and I don't know as much about the electoral area housing as I would in the municipality, but I would think then, in order to make them potentially legal, you would have to have a way to address the waste, the human waste. And I don't know if you know, but BC has passed a legal composting toilet regime. So there are solutions out there. And I hope that your group can kind of be active, because 5 years ago, I suggested to Island Health that they needed to work with the BC Building Code Department, whichever ministry that is, to allow tiny homes. And they said, well, we can't, they're not safe. And I said, oh, so tents are safer? And all the faces kind of froze. And I did expect something to come forward, but what I think is, and I think you can probably understand it, all levels of government have been kind of in crisis mode for quite some time now. And so you may want to contact that department, whoever it is, what ministry, Chair Stone probably knows, that deals with the BC Building Code, because as a municipality, we can't legally allow something that's against the BC Building Code, or we're liable if there's a problem. But I think it could be solved. And I think if the grassroots come forward, you would have great luck doing it. And my last thing is a question. Is the journey of our generation the 4-day thing that Quixote takes people on every year, or is it something else?
I could send a link to it if you like. They have a website now, but I think it is related to some of the other workshops that were mentioned as well.
So it's a day-long thing, not a 4-day trek.
Yeah.
Great. Appreciate to get that link. Thanks, Cody.
Yeah, if you could share that, just board@cvrd.ca would be amazing. Thank you. Director McGonigal, you're up, and then I've got a few words to close if I don't see any other hands.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and thank you, Cody, for your presentation. I echo Chair Stone's suggestion of visiting all the municipalities as well for your presentation, encouraging those municipalities to look at solutions that are currently not within their OCPs and zoning bylaws. In the town of Lake Cowichan, we have looked at rental-only zones within developments. We have looked at secondary suites. We have looked at garden homes in the back. Unfortunately, there has been no uptick on that. And that is part of the problem. If there's no buy-in from the community, the affordability stock is not provided. So that is the encouragement that is needed as leaders for people to embrace that as an option for attainable, affordable accommodations. In the West End here, and I'm sure Director Morrison and Director Kuhn will agree, we have been an affordable entity for quite some time. With the assessments and the land prices, that has changed. And people are looking in our area as investment properties. And that is also putting a crux on the housing emergency. So I suggest that there are some alternative zoning applications that can be applied. They have been very successful in other parts of British Columbia in getting attainable, affordable housing in rental-only stock, for instance, incentivizing developers to incorporate that in their developments. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. I'd love to reply. Appreciate all the comments and the questions and the comments that were made and the support from council. I'd like to just reply now just because there's a few pieces that came up, and I'd love to get the exact process for the document you mentioned, and also really appreciate what you said about asking staff to do some work around it. That's a big thing right now, and thing I've heard from a lot of supporters, both landowners and people who are wanting to live on land here, and do live on the land here, is that they just don't have the time. Things are so tight, especially for people with families. So this is the thing with grassroots now, is how do we call the grassroots forward when nobody has time or money? Like in the 70s, I think people had a bit more time to protest, and even then it was a lot, and not a ton changed in some ways. So I think it's really worthwhile to call for the people, but I also really appreciate and hear that this sounds like CVRD's working on these parts, and just the support and comments made to help people be heard and to be able to live on the land. And yeah, I think it would go a long way even just to declare a housing emergency and start that process. So that fully acknowledging what's happening that way, and then putting some pressure on the provincial government from the, I guess, board of the CVRD. And just to note, I really get the municipality part, and I have talked to North Cowichan. It was a previous more about farm and agriculture, but similar stuff, and I really welcome us to go do that, as well as just noting that a lot of folks we've been talking to are in the CVRD electoral districts, and so a lot of large acreages could have the capacity to hold even a few tiny homes each, or vans, or people that are otherwise homeless at this point. And so, which then kind of cascades into mental health, other stuff, addictions, things can start capturing people when they're not in a safe place. So I think a temporary move to just support that, I feel like the CVRD can make a huge difference, and hopefully the municipalities will also support and be on board as well. So thanks for all the comments, and I hope I touched on those parts that you mentioned.
Thank you, and I'll go to Director Morrison if you'd like to make that motion in just a second. I just want to recognize that I think that we're all, I'm sorry, we don't take questions from the gallery during the meetings, but if you'd like at the question period at the conclusion, we would welcome you to come forward. It's a really challenging, as you are aware. Not only are we dealing with things like short-term rentals, as a business owner, we've had to basically close whole sections of our business due to lack of employees, due to lack of affordable housing. When my last full-time employee left, they said, I just can't find any place to live. So it wasn't even about the affordability, it was about availability at all. And now in this market, we're building more rental housing than ever in our community than has been built since the early 70s. And the prices to build those new buildings make it impossible without some major subsidy to make them truly affordable. We do have young people and workers and young families living in these rental accommodations that have been built, but the rents, by my definition, are nowhere near affordable, but the investments won't come forward if they can't charge those rents. So it's a bit of a catch-22. And we've had some news regarding BC Housing recently, but our experience, again, with BC Housing has been it takes so long to work through their process in this hyperinflated environment, and even in a subsidized environment, they're still hardly affordable once they're built. So we're hopeful that pressure on the province is an important tool, because BC Housing needs to be prudent, but needs to move quickly enough that the economics don't fall apart by the time the projects are built. And that, you made a comment, and I would just say, this group doesn't need to be protested. You said protest. It's about collaboration. It's about bringing in other supporters, bringing in tourism and chambers of commerce, because we're all having that same discussion. It's about affordability, worker availability. So that affects, as you said, everything. So whether it's agriculture or a Main Street retail small business, if we don't have affordable housing for our workers, nothing works. Right? And as a small business owner who's been putting in long evenings because of lack of employees, and in fact had to scale down our business and change our, pivot, I don't want to hear that anymore, but pivot to a different business model almost entirely just to survive after 20 years in business and thriving business. It's really frustrating, and it hits home for me and my family, as well as every member of this board and all the directors here. So you have a supportive group. No need to protest us. Collaborate with us. Keep feeding us that information, those ideas. And if you come to the councils, I think you'll find if we can develop a checklist together, we might be able to check some of those off already within our new OCPs, but also find that direction that flowing out of those processes, how do we need to change our zoning? We can move quickly when we're able to dedicate the resources. Immediacy in local government sometimes means months. In the midterm might mean years. So, continue to work with us, though, and we'll work within whatever capabilities we have to move forward quickly. So I just want to thank you for your presentation. And when it comes from the grassroots, it often comes from the heart. I can feel that. And I want to thank you because I think it made an impact on me, and I've made a lot of notes here. I'm going to take them back to Ladysmith, and hopefully welcome you as a delegation soon and help find that conversation at our table as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe in collaboration as well. That's
Absolutely.
the key. Yeah.
So virtual clap for those away, but.
Chair, I think Director Yanni Darnito wanted to say
Oh,
something.
sorry, Lori.
Yeah, I was just trying to get your attention. I felt that your option was far better than another resolution for staff with timelines. And, you know, we're the CVRD for August and then the election. So in the group sending their message to the different municipalities would be valuable. I'm not sure the timeline in a resolution now with staff, and we normally don't do resolutions when we have delegations, but I leave that up to the committee.
Thank you. So it's, you know, we do have a member who may wish to make a motion. So I will go to Director Morrison, and then the board or committee can decide how do we move forward.
Thank you, and I've taken Director Yanni DiNardo's concerns into consideration, and I've sort of made the resolution somewhat open so that staff can choose not only the timeline, but the appropriate committee for this to possibly come back to. So, and we'll put it out there for committee's consideration, and I would move that staff prepare a report to consider the delegation's request for action based on information contained in their delegation request form for consideration at a future meeting.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Nicholson. I don't want to squelch debate on a motion, but I think we've heard the delegation, we've heard the motion. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the motion before I call the question? Directors Nicholson and Smith.
Thank you. I just think a motion would be helpful because this is such an important issue. We don't want it to get lost. So it at least gets on some sort of a tracking system, so it will come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Smith, and then Director Acton.
Thank you. I also take the points that we are going into election period. We have staff off for the summer. I think that our strategic initiatives department is already working hard on our modernization through the electoral areas. We're listening to our communities through that process. The process is moving along, and I think that we would be overstepping our communities at this time. I wouldn't support this motion at this time. We also hear that the staff doesn't have the capacity for many projects that we keep putting on top of them. And I think this would just be extra work when they're already doing this work for our modernization and with our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Acton. Hopefully something that hasn't been spoken.
Thank you. I would just motion to refer this to our electoral area services. We've already discussed that different municipalities are doing different things, but we could have continue this discussion like electoral area services and discuss how we can incorporate into our MOCP and HOCP.
And I believe that was seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Yes. So the motion on the floor has been referred. A motion to refer has been made on the motion on the floor to send it over to Electoral Area Services. Is there any discussion on the referral? Thank you. Director Morrison.
I'm just curious if we're expecting staff to provide us something on the next EAS agenda in regards to supporting this request.
I would say no. I would leave it to the chair of EASC to put it on the agenda for discussion.
Yeah, my understanding is the motion has been referred to EAS for discussion, so this wouldn't be to create a report. The motion to create a report would be referred for consideration at Electoral Area Services. That's just me as a procedure geek. Okay, I think I'm correct on that. So no more discussion on the referral. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Morrison opposed. Director Nicholson opposed. Motion carries. You'll be continuing this discussion at your next Electoral Area Services. Godspeed, my friends. And that takes us to the end of our delegation. Cody, don't take this as anything. In some ways, this might be better. The discussion will continue where it's probably most effective, which is next week at the is there an Electoral Area Services next week? Not for a month. So procedure is what it is, and this is why local government moves so quickly. But I do want to thank you all and really do invite you. Many of the local governments are closed kind of for August, not closed, we're all working every day, but don't have any meetings, but I do invite you to come. And in the context of the discussions that'll be happening in September leading up to a local election, hey, not a bad time to hit the political points. So I will thank you, we'll give you a virtual clap, and thank you again, and appreciate all your work.
Thank you.
Director Manhattan.
Just a quick comment for Mr. Wicks. We have the North Cowichan Council is meeting August 17th and to discuss the OCP. So if you wanted to have public input at that time, you're more than welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
To the board, we usually take a break after 90 minutes. I thought we'd be a little further along, but let's take a recess now and come back just after 11 o'clock. Thank you all very much.
We're still buffering.
See, we even got an echo from the buffering. We're still buffering, but once we get everybody's camera on and the buffering's complete, we'll resume. Thank you, everyone. We're live. I believe we're down to R1. Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R1 is a report from the Parks and Trails Division with regard to the Cowichan Valley Trail, Malahat Connection Trail License Agreement Renewal. And I think either Ms. Soroka or Mr. Boyson will be speaking to it.
Thank you.
Or possibly Mr. Farquhar?
Or Mr. Farquhar.
Sorry.
Welcome, Mr. Farquhar.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. The report before you is about a license agreement renewal for a short section of the Cowichan Valley Trail up off of Souk Lake Road in South Shawnigan. We've had an agreement in place with a private landowner for a number of years. As noted in the report, the current license has recently expired, and the property owner is agreeable to a renewal for a one-year renewal with an option to renew for a further year. And in the interim, we will continue to explore longer-term options to secure this short section, but very important piece of the Cowichan Valley Trail that connects our Souk Lake Road parking lots with our Malahat connection up over the Malahat down into the greater Victoria area in terms of the overall Trans-Canada Trail experience. So the recommendation is before the committee. Happy to answer any questions the committee may have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I look forward to a motion or questions. Director Acton?
Moved. So moved.
We have a seconder. Director Salmon. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? And opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Farquhar, for your concise presentation. Moving on, Mr. Robbins.
Is report R2, report from Parks and Trails Division with regards to the Kinsel Trestle Gateway Project. Mr. Farquhar, are you going to take this one too?
Back to you, Mr. Farquhar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report, Mr. Chair, is reporting back on direction given by the board back in April to do a phase 1 detail assessment of the Taylor Park proposal to establish a Kinsel Trestle staging area. As noted in the report, we further engaged a consulting team that undertook a number of focus works, including environmental assessment, topographic survey, geotech assessment, and environmental site plan. Through all that detailed work that was done, as attached to the staff report, the outcome of those assessments through the phase 1 work has determined that due to environmental setbacks in regards to wetland areas mapped out within Taylor Park, and that the project's original design program would not otherwise fit within the remaining space that could otherwise be available to establish parking areas. So The staff report before the committee is recommending that no further work be done on this project for the Kinsale staging area, and that the committee give consideration to working with the grant funding providers to otherwise redirect the grant funds approved to our North Watch project associated with the Cowichan Valley Trail that has similar benefits to that the grant program provides for, that would allow the CBRD to complete that project and reduce CBRD expenditures that otherwise could be put towards a future parking area for the Kinsale Trestle, based on doing additional work in the community to try and find a more suitable location to deal with the current stressors around parking associated with the massive amount of visitorship we see to the Kinsale Trestle every year. So with that, Mr. Chair, the report has the attachments dealing with the environmental and engineering assessment work done. Happy to answer any questions that the committee may have, but otherwise the recommendation is before you.
Thank you. The recommendations there. I do have Director Wilson and Director Nicholson, I believe, on my speakers list, and then Director Marsh, but I will go to Director Wilson first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to propose that we sever recommendations 1 and 2 because number 2 has some serious ramifications in the way that it has been forward, please. And if I have a seconder, I would appreciate it. Thank you. And
thank you. So looking for a seconder on the motion to sever. It's not on the floor yet, so but I'll take a second from Director Smith. We can quickly deal with that. I'm happy to deal with them one at a time. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. So we'll deal with them individually, and I'll go back to my speakers list. Did you have anything else did you want to say on the subject, Director Wilson?
I do actually, and let me just get my notes here. Mr. Chair, I have a number of points to make in support of the, sorry, I'm reading the long notes here. I have a number of points that I would like to make, and in this particular case, I will try and be brief, but I would be very appreciative if you could extend the same courtesy to my comments has been made to others. In the past, page 3 of the Aquarian report here has pointed out that, you know, what we already knew, that there are wetlands here. And one of the big things that really comes to mind here is that I have serious concerns as to the way this was brought forward. You know, the board made a decision originally to go ahead with this on the basis of information that was later retracted. And this whole thing is just, you know, should never have gone as far as it is. My understanding was that the SERIT funds could not be redirected, and yet we're being told that they are going to be making recommendations that it can be redirected. And with the severance that we've got here, I am pleased to see that this is not going ahead, but I've got some other points that I'd like to make when we look at the point number 2, but thank you for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you. I will go to the next speaker is Director Nicholson and then Director Marsh.
So I have 2 questions. One is I would like to know what the cost of all the studies that we did on this project were totaled, and I'd also like to know if we spent any money on a feasibility study of the Trestle Estate site.
Through to staff, Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, as noted in the report, the recent work done totals approximately $19,000, and no geotechnical or environmental assessment work on the Trestle Estates property was not done. There were a number of factors that precluded that site being further looked at in detail. A couple of considerable ones being the area is a fill site from the development that took place there. It's over 5 stories above the Cowichan Valley Trail, and there were significant access issues between what was being proposed or looked at as a potential parking area and the trail itself below.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Director Nicholson?
So I'm to understand that it is not feasible based on staff. So the $459,000 could not be put towards that as a potential solution to the parking issue.
Mr. Chair, if that was the direction of the committee and the board, we could go back to the grant funding providers. However, as previously shared, the initial look at that site in terms of its greater distance away from the trestle, being on the south side of Brentwood Road, significant grade difference between the potential site for parking and accessibility to the trail itself were a number of the factors that precluded that as a potential site for dealing with developing as a new staging area for the Kinsale Trestle.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. So I will go to the next speaker is Director Marsh and then Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to preface my comments and questions by saying I feel very awkward asking these questions, although I feel that's part of the role of being on an elected and appointed to an elected body. I'm curious how the initial environmental assessment could have gotten it so wrong. That's the first question. And the second question is, had the board not chosen to ask staff to get a second environmental assessment, would we be paving over Taylor Park?
Through to staff.
Mr. Chair, I can't respond to the first one because the preliminary work was done by a separate environmental consulting firm, and the information they provided was the information they determined on their preliminary review. With respect to the second question, I think the work being done demonstrates what would otherwise have been done regardless of direction of the board in terms of advancing a project such as this. And the outcomes of that additional phase one work would have also determined, as it has done, that it was not feasible to proceed with the project. So it would not have been something that would have been paved over. We have been doing the due diligence on this project as we do with all projects in terms of the front end work that looks at all issues, including environmental.
That's very comforting to hear, Mr. Farquhar, and I'm glad that we have that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look to the committee to support the community of Glen Eagles in the second resolution to include a report back prior to the budget of 2023. We discussed a little bit today the impacts of tourism on our communities. And although I do reiterate that the community is very grateful for the Trans-Canada Trail, its popularity has caused mostly direct impact to the community of Glen Eagles, where there's more than 100 homes and not sufficient parking. It's quite unsafe for them to walk the roads. And then when there's overflow parking all along the streets, it's also unsafe for people to walk in their community. So I just look to the committee for that, and I suspect that you will support that because this is a regional park that has great significance, and we want to deliver an appropriate destination for people, and we also want to protect our communities and provide safe spaces for everyone. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And I note that we do not have a motion on the floor at this point, but I just wanted to I'll go to Director Salmon. You moving both of them? We'll still consider them separately?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note, it looks like there's a consultant in the room. I don't know if we want to invite comments.
Sorry?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Farquhar?
Yes, we do have a consultant from Cascara here if there is any technical questions arising from the reports attached to the staff report. But otherwise, there's no presentation by the consultants this time, given all the information that's attached to the reports.
Thank you. Okay, and I saw Director Smith's hand. Are you moving the resolution? Okay, so Director Smith has moved number 1. Do we have a seconder for that? Director Wilson seconds. So we'll go to discussion. I did have a couple of points that I wanted to make from my perspective of how this unfolded. Couple of notes. Early on in the SAREP program, I know that our municipal understanding was as well that they were basically locked into certain projects and couldn't be reallocated. I do recognize that it seems the province has loosened their perspective on that. We're doing something similar with asking for a slight modification to, not as big a modification to a grant receipt, but a similar request to modify the grant program or the capital works that are being done under that grant award municipally. So I think that's been part of the ongoing conversation with the province around COVID relief funding, is that they're providing a little more flexibility as some things have become more obvious coming out of COVID. The second thing is that my understanding was always that we were pushed and rushed to get these applications in, and it wasn't possible, and again, in Ladysmith as well, to do a full accounting of projects that were being submitted for grants, and that would come at a later stage. And when we had conversations around the environmental concerns related to Taylor Park, it was always my understanding that it wouldn't go ahead if what is essentially presented in this report turned out to be the reality. So I'm thankful that we're taking that sober second look based on the environmental information. And it's just unfortunate that we weren't able to provide that comfort enough to the Taylor family during the conversations that came previously to allow this process to unfold the way that it has, because I think in the end, good decisions are being put before the board today. So we do have number 1 on the floor. Did anyone want to speak further to that before we call the question? Director Martman and Marsh.
Yeah, I would like to speak in favor of number 1, but also to put a little bit of a context on it from the northern or westernmost part of the CVRD, that eventually the Cowichan Valley Trail needs to go somewhere, and we're the somewhere. So looking forward to, in the future, something coming through to our area. Thank you.
And beyond, to connect us to regions far and wide.
Is there a beyond? Sorry.
There is yes, there is. It's called the Regional District of Nanaimo. I'll let them know you said that. Director Marsh, please go ahead, and then Director Nicholson, and then Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a very worthy project. I think I heard Mr. Farquhar say a little bit ago that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Farquhar, that the SAREP funds could have been put towards a feasibility study for parking in near Kinsale Trestle. Did I hear you correctly?
Mr. Farquhar.
So the SAREP funds are not for feasibility work. They are for, in essence, deliverable projects. So not for feasibility work.
So they have to be shovel ready?
That is the essence of the grant program, yes. Not for going on feasibility.
Sorry, just to clarify, what was told to us at the time was shovel-worthy, recognizing that some of the shovel-ready project portions may not be able to take place before the grant applications.
So thank you for that. So I would like to segue from that, Mr. Chair. I'm aware that Director Nicholson has been trying for quite some time to get a trail in Area E, and that trail would join and help join the grant funding that Cowichan Tribes has gotten near Georgetown, and get people from Area E on their bicycles potentially, or walking into Duncan. And I'm wondering, how did this one get prioritized? Not that I'm saying it isn't an important one. However, I think that there is a way that's a little bit safer along the corridor from Chemainus to Ladysmith than we currently have in Glenora. So could you speak to that, please, Mr. Farquhar, through the chair?
I'll go to Mr. Farquhar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the essence of the SAREP grant program is around tourism and tourism recovery. So when we looked at what possibly the CVRD had in terms of shovel ready or shovel moving ahead, the project we have basically ready to go up there in Saltaire deals with the larger tourism element of the Cowichan Valley Trail. It's not about just dealing with, let's say, local local opportunities in terms of connectivity or pedestrian and safety issues. It's really around the tourism realm. So this fits in well with the tourism pressures we're seeing between sort of Chemainus, Saltaire, and Ladysmith in terms of what the connection of the Cowichan Valley Trail has brought in terms of increased demand on the trail and similar parking issues at that North Watts Road area, and dealing with people coming from outside the community in terms of what that attraction is versus dealing with a local community matter in terms of pedestrian safety.
So that's a carrot kind of boundary.
Yes.
Yeah, it was tourism infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, certainly, certainly we could use what is the motion is. I just was feeling a bit concerned about the safety of the people in Glenora who've been waiting for a long time. And I'm hearing that this isn't possible to be directed there. So I do support it going to Watts Road.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, and then Smith, and then I've got myself.
I actually would like to make a comment, and it's not so much about what the motion on the floor, so I will wait. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to you after we deal with this motion. Director Smith.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity that the funds are being redirected to this very important section of the trail that's been a gap for many years now and has had some safety issues. Parking has become, it's so popular. The parking goes all the way up the road on North Watts Road, impacting all the residents in that area. So it is, the parking lot is very a much needed project that has now been able to be included under this funding, and also the safety of those going across the road. We've already had one person who was hit and air ambulanced out. So I think this is just an amazing project, and I can't wait to see it get started. It's awfully exciting for the community of Ladysmith. I know how many people from Ladysmith walk daily all that route, and it's great for our health and well-being within the area, and for all those to come and enjoy our area. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question through to staff. Did we not have funding already allocated to this project? And if that funding is basically displaced by this grant funding, would it be possible to look at the other projects that are being referred to, both feasibility around the Shawnigan access as well as some work on the connector referenced in Area E?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the majority of the funding otherwise currently identified for the North Watts Road project is previously approved board short-term borrowing through the regional parks function. So at the discretion of the board, if the board approves the redirection of the SIRP funds to North Watts and the province approves that subsequent redirection, then through the board, we could certainly look at the short-term borrowing funds under regional parks towards other suitable projects the board thinks would be important to pursue.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify that the reason I asked the question, and you answered my second question as well, was that if these are priorities of the board, and I'm hearing, I think that they are, that this could provide more flexibility in addressing both of those issues, at least in the near term, to do the work that's required to get another shovel-ready project for Kinsale, as well as to move the bar along in that connection concern with Area E without the restrictions provided by the SARP funding. So I would be supporting both resolutions and hopefully working on those other two priorities as well. I think it is a win-win potentially, but also recognizing that we have to get that approval from the province. So we do have motion number 1 on the floor. I don't see any other speakers to it. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. We'll move on to number 2, and this is the securing long-term solution to address parking congestion issues associated with visitations to the historic Kinsale Trestle on the Cowichan Valley Trail be approved. Is that moved by Director Acton?
Yes,
And
I'd like to add, can I add that it prior to the 2023 budget?
That would be, if you're making the motion, it would be your prerogative. So to add at the end there, prior to the 2023 budget. And do we have a seconder for that? Director McGonigal seconded, it looks like. Mr. Farquhar, I saw your hand pop up for a moment. Did you wish to comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I appreciate the indication about achieving this prior to the 2023 budget. However, it's about securing a long-term solution, and that could take greater effort and time than the budget timeline we have for 2023. So it's really about finding that long-term solution, but that could take some time to determine and actually secure. It's not something that we necessarily could see unfold within the next 3 or 4 or 5 months.
Well, I read it as the plan coming forward.
Okay, yes, thank you, Director Acton. So I was going to comment that the way the motion is worded to me says that we're confirming that priority prior to the budget. Obviously, some of that work would need to be budgeted, but I'm not sure that the intent was that the solution be found before the budget. Thank you. Sorry, did I miss anyone who wishes to speak to this? Director Marsh and then Director Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if we need to include something on the Area E trail.
I was going to go to Director Nicholson following if she would like to make a motion. I have a little asterisk in the corner of my sheet of speakers here.
Super, thank you. Should have known how we're on top of it.
Well, I'm not always, and I'm a little rusty, so. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's obvious here throughout this whole process that the Taylor family has been put through considerable stress, both psychological and financial, which has been a little bit unfair, I think, but there we are. That's what's happened. So I've got two things that I'd like to say. Well, number one is, given that we now have the information in the present Aquaparian report, will this committee now assure the Taylor family and residents of the Cowichan Valley Regional District that no further encroachment projects or studies are foreseen or will take place in this environmentally sensitive area? And number two, given that the Taylor family has always intended and has always maintained that this environmentally sensitive parcel was gifted freely as a donation with the express intent of being protected as parkland, will this committee now assure the public that in the future, any lands gifted as a parkland donation will be held as such without the need for complicated and costly legal documentation? Only in this manner will we be able to regain the public trust that their wishes will be honored in perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I'm not disagreeing with any of the words you said, but we do have a motion on the floor. So we can't make those guarantees right now, but we can have a further discussion after we deal with the motion that's on the floor.
And if necessary, I can bring that forward as a motion.
Thank you. So any further discussion on number 2? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Director Nicholson, I said I would come back to you. Did you wish to either make a motion or comment?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I think this is a very unfortunate process on this particular project. And I think and I appreciate Director Wilson's comment that the Taylors have really been stressed about it. But I would also say the whole community, a large number of people in the community have been very engaged and provided a lot of feedback and spent time. And I have really appreciated everyone's input, both the people who have the parking issue and the people who are really concerned about protecting the parkland. And it strikes me that if we had had a solid inventory of our parkland assets, this would never have happened. And you cannot manage what you don't know you have. And I really think it's past time for our park program, both regionally and the community parks program, to do an inventory of the ecosystems that they have out there. And I know that the stewardship community would be, who have a lot of qualified people, would be thrilled to be asked to volunteer their time to help with that work. And I don't think it would be that expensive to hire someone to plan and coordinate such a project with the volunteer, with the stewardship community. And we really need to have that information so we don't make these kind of mistakes again. So I'm not quite sure how to bring that forward. I didn't make a motion, but I certainly want people to start thinking about that. We don't know what we have in our parks, and as the climate changes and the environment changes, we're going to lose things that are probably very important. So I would like us to start thinking more long-term about how we manage our parks, and not just for the good of recreation. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll take that in the context of the discussion for a moment. I have Directors Salmon and then Wilson.
Thank you. So just as far as priorities for trails, and maybe circling back to what you were saying, Mr. Chair, but so here in Area A, we've got the Shawnee Bay Road roadside path partway built now, halting about halfway through due to lack of cost escalation. So we used up all the gas tax money, and there's, it's partway done, and I know we've got the Area E path long discussed, and I think Area H has a path wanting to start. So I'm just, maybe a question for Mr. Farquhar, is there a need, or how do we weigh and prioritize how we move forward with these various needs?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Salmon. On top of all of that, through prior direction of the board, we are currently engaged with the regional community in undertaking the preparation of a regional active transportation plan that we're looking forward to completing through the fall with the consultants and further public engagement. So we'll be looking at, I think, at two levels through the regional district. Both one, future board direction upon receipt of this regional active transportation plan in terms of how that will help overlay priorities around a regional network for community pathway connections, and ongoing what's happening in the individual electoral areas in terms of where we have community parks, trails, master plans providing guidance, or through the MOCP in terms of what otherwise is funded and prioritized in terms of community parks and trails priorities for local community connections. So in terms of prioritizing, it's going to be at two levels. One's going to be, I think, within the individual electoral areas in terms of how pathway projects prioritize against other parks projects funded through the individual electoral area community parks budgets. So certainly as staff, we'll look forward to direction as early as the upcoming budget for 2023. And then secondly, as I mentioned, bringing forward the regional active transportation plan. I think through the committee of the whole and the board, we'll be looking at holistically how the board wishes to move forward with that once you have a chance to see all the details as presented.
Follow up.
Yes, follow up.
So yeah, I don't really want to elbow forward with my Area A centric thing, but since we do have this path, well, under construction, well, half constructed, and stalled due to the cost escalation, it won't connect to where Briarwood Avenue and Greater Mill Bay, where it was intended to go. I'm I don't know if that, how we would, if we could get prioritization on something that's already started. I would appreciate that.
Mr. Farquhar?
Again, through direction of the board in terms of budget priorities, I think what Director Salmon is noting will need to be considered by the board ultimately when it comes to looking at available funds and future budgets. So as staff, will look forward to that direction.
Thank you. What I'm hearing a few things here, and I want to find some focus here. We've actually dealt with the item that's on the agenda, but I do want to give folks the opportunity to sort of conclude this discussion without going too far afield. I did have Director Wilson next, and if there are any subsequent motions to have staff prioritize anything, I would welcome those, but if we could just try and get that focus. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just in answer to Director Nicholson's query just now, I have been asking for the same list of parklands that we've got within the CBRD for some time. In actual fact, I have a very comprehensive spreadsheet which shows practically every park, every area that we have, and I'm quite willing to share that with this board, which I have done before. I've also shared that with the Parks Department. So if Director Nicholson wants another copy of that, I'll be more than happy to share that, and with Parks Department so that they can update their database.
Thank you. And I see Director Marsh's hand and
I
Director
just would like a
Nicholson's.
copy too. I would just like a copy to Director Wilson. Thank you.
And just updating my speakers list, I have Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I just want to clarify for Director Wilson. I don't want a list of parks. I want there to be a inventory of the ecosystems that we have in those parks. And when I say ecosystems, that would include whether something is a wetland or a Douglas fir forest type or a rocky outcrop meadow or whatever. Understanding what you have in the parks is essential to be able to look after it, to care for it in the long term. And that was the problem that we ran into at this Taylor Park. Staff didn't understand what they were managing. So we should have that ahead of time so that we don't waste time when we're doing planning for infrastructure. Waste time and money. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will just say I'm hearing two things. One is about like a park's asset inventory, like a biodiversity list of the parks and what they contain, and perhaps maps and such. Definitely not a small project. And the other was a desire to talk about the prioritization of different projects. You know, we're not on an item now, and if I don't see any motions come forward, I think this discussion is concluded. So I'll look forward to a motion, and if not, we'll move on to R3. I'll go to Director Acton for a motion, and then we'll move on to R3.
No, perhaps just a question to close. I just wanted some clarity on we heard a member declare that this was a gift to the CBRD. I just wanted some clarity around that. That is not what was presented at the beginning of this process.
Put that through to staff, and then perhaps maybe the directors who are concerned about prioritization would come with a director's point to report to the next meeting, because it doesn't seem that any motions are formalized to the point where we can consider them today. But through to staff on the question.
Mr. Chair, the Taylor Park was associated with a rezoning that was approved by the board.
Thank you. And I'll go to Director Salmon, and then we'll move on to R3.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd just like to move that we do prioritize completing the Shawnigan Mill Bay Road pathway that is now partway through being built.
Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Directors Acton and then Nicholson.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Not that I don't support that trail. I think we need to look at our priorities all together, not just one item. And I'm here. You know, I feel for Director Salmon. I'm there to support Mill Bay, but I think we need to look at everything all together. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Director Nicholson.
I concur with Director Acton.
Thank you. So if we have no further discussion, I would suggest that we could, again, make a director's report to a subsequent meeting with those individual issues that may be related but not directly contained within this report. I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? And opposed? And the motion is defeated.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could ask a question very quickly, please.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, sir. With the two things that I brought forward just now with some assurances to the Taylor family and the public, how would I go about bringing that forward for consideration by the board, please?
I would say the chair and staff might be able to support a director's report coming forward. What I heard was a couple of things. The other thing I meant to say is the parks inventory, but also the donation policy, that we well inventory and document these things at time of donation. Now that's obviously casting forward, but having those in place would definitely prevent this kind of consternation in the future.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. I'll write a director's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We're seeing none. We're moving on to R3. Mr. Robbins.
R3 is a report from the Economic Development Division with regards to the Tourism Cowichan 2022 Annual Work Plan and Financials. And there's a recommendation before the committee.
Thank you. Is that a motion, Director Marsh? Thank you. And a seconder? Director Morrison, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion is unanimous. We're moving right along. Mr. Robbins.
R4 is a report, again from the Economic Development Division with regards to Regional Tourism Services Contribution Agreement 2019 to 2022 amendment. And there's a two-part recommendation for the committee.
Thank you. And we do have the two parts there to the motion. I think in one piece is suitable, but it's up to the board. Do we have a mover of the motion or the resolution recommendations? I'll find the words. Moved by Director Morrison. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Marsh. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Director Acton is opposed? No. None opposed. Motion carries. Director Acton had a question.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chair, sorry, you kind of went a little too fast there. So you didn't even give it, I didn't have time to pull up the next item, but I just wanted, and I still am sitting here saying, okay, I wanted to make a comment on the type of motion that we are presented with. So now we've moved on. Okay, for R4, number 1, it says, as outlined in the Economic Development Division staff report to the July 27th, so to just refer to the staff report, I think is just too vague. It doesn't actually convey the full motion. The community, it would be nice, I think it's better governance if the community can just refer to the motion and get a full sense as to what's moved. So just wanted to make that comment. I support the motions, but I think, we could have them be a little bit cleaner.
Thank you for that, and I will assume that staff will take that under advisement. In this particular case, it would have to be a very detailed and long resolution if it was to contain all the ins and outs of the contribution service agreement. So I understand the referral there, but that's just a different perspective. But if staff can add a little bit more meat to the bones of those resolutions, I think that's what Director Acton's getting at. I think. She's not waving me off, so okay, we're good. Okay, that takes us to R5, Regional Recreation Governance Options. We're at 11:45, so just mindful of time. I'll go through to, there's no recommendation, it is for direction. So I don't know if a member of staff was wishing to set the table for us. I did see our friend Mr. Elzinga pop up, so please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the committee. So the report in front of you does outline that staff had put forward a recommendation to look at task forces after the election in November. However, staff have heard that the committee is interested in some form of a commission structure. So we've presented that, a streamlined commission structure with options on thresholds, as has been brought forward in the past. Staff would be looking for direction on equal representation. Should there be unequal representation if there is unequal usage? So that's a possible discussion. Whether the commissions would be made up of elected officials or appointed, because in this current environment we have both. And of course, if usage percentage changes in the future following a 2027 facility use study, does commission makeup change? So, Mr. Chair, there's a few different items to discuss. We're looking for direction.
Thank you. So we'll open it up for discussion. I would just make a note that commissions are usually endowed with powers. I know that our advisory committees aren't in the municipality because it really is rightly the role of council or the board to make those decisions. But definitely a topic of conversation. I'm looking for hands. I may have looked down at my paper when I saw them. I see Director Acton and Director Salmon so far.
I'll let Director Salmon go. He did have his hand up well before mine.
Thanks, Director Salmon. I wasn't looking at my screen. Please go ahead.
No worries, thank you. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Elzinger, for preparing this. I'm just wondering, as far as timing, whether we want to defer this, if the referendum does not pass, it's moot. I think it's great information to have, but really, if we're going to look at other options in November, anyway, this would just fit in nicely with that. So I'm wondering if others are in agreement, I'd be prepared to motion to refer it to a future committee of the whole meeting.
So that's been moved and seconded, but I saw Mr. Elzinga raise his hand, and I don't know he wasn't seconding the resolution or the motion. So, Mr. Elzinga.
Just to concur, staff agree that there is no time sensitivity to this, so a deferral motion could certainly be appropriate.
Thank you. And yeah, I had similar thoughts to Director Salmon. Is let's look at what the outcome is before we dig into the governance. But I do think there's good models throughout the region that empower the citizenry that are participating in each sort of sub-regional area or each facility based on what we have in our municipalities and in the parks commissions and the recreation commissions throughout the region. So that has been moved and seconded. This is basically a referral motion to a committee of the whole after the general election, after the referendum, I believe. Director Salmon, is that correct? Thank you. Any further discussion on that referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Director Martman, I'm sorry you got cut off there, and Director Acton. I give you your time if you wish to say anything, Director Acton or Director Martin. No? Okay. Thank you so much. So I believe... Oh, sorry, Tim. I'm looking at my paper again. It's hard to do. Go ahead.
It is, especially in a hybrid situation. You're looking around the room. I'm not there at the moment, unfortunately, but I think this will give us... As do I with yours. I think this will give us time to digest some of the options. It's quite a in-depth report with considerable options. And all I will say, the Cowichan Lake Recreation Formulary with the recreation-based interest from citizens and elected officials has done us very well in the past, and that model is also equated within some of the options. So I look forward to A, the results of the referendum, and B, the discussion on what the governance model shall look like. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just had to get some effects on my voice there, so I used the other mic, also known as the wrong mic. Not you, Mike, the other Mike. So I believe that takes us to our new business items. I think the first of the two we should deal with is the bylaw, because there are some changes there. I put it over to Mr. Robbins to introduce the item and provide some input to the committee, and then we'll move on to the more detailed discussion I think that will follow. Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a late item that was distributed to the committee on Monday. It's with respect to bylaw 4438, the Regional Recreation Funding Bylaw. The committee might recall that after 3 readings, this bylaw was forwarded to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for comment and review. We received that comment and review back late last week, and they had and we subsequently met with them electronically, and we've come up with the bylaw to address the points that they made when they did the review. Just to be clear, the form and substance of the bylaw has not changed. And so the two things in the amendment include the maximum requisition amount per 1,000 of assessed values. When we originally submitted the bylaw, it included values from BC assessment that were converted, but the ministry has requested that we use net taxable values by BC assessment. And so there's a change in the amount per 1,000. The second request by the ministry was to put a schedule together that showed the existing services under existing establishing bylaws, and that is the subject of Schedule B. And that is just, as they say, a great concurrence between the consolidated new bylaw and what the existing service establishment bylaws were, or are, excuse me.
Thank you. So this is in some ways, obviously just for accuracy and feedback from the province. The recommendations are there in front of us. Do we have a motion or a discussion? Director Marsh and then Director Manhas.
I have a question, and it was before the last election that we were posing a similar question on the amount per 1,000. And I believe at the end of the day, Mr. Kieber, who was the financial officer at the time, said that we needed to properly do it on 100,000, but I could be mistaken. It's a few years ago now, and I don't know if Ms. Weiner would recall that 4 years later or not.
I'll put that through to Ms. Weiner. I just know that this was the feedback from the province, but Ms. Weiner.
Through the chair to Director Marsh, no, we have to report it by 1,000. We have to set the rate for it. So that's what it is by the province. The confusion in this case just was we did net. It was net taxable value, but ours was net taxable value by converted first, and this one is net taxable value of overall assessments. That was the only change, and that's what's required from the province. So we can't report by 100,000.
Okay. The other thing I would just wonder is if our municipality of North Cowichan acting directors receive that email, and if they would prefer to get it before they make their decision.
Thank you. Through to staff, were these documents provided to the alternate directors that are attending today?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that the distribution list would have included them or not.
I think I'm seeing no, they were not.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's why I wanted to make a comment, have my hand up, because either Councillor Sori or myself have not received this.
Thank you. So we can deal with that perhaps by just taking a short recess. It's not a complicated report. Ms. Sari, have you been able to get a copy of it, Director Sari?
No, I haven't. I just requested it.
Okay, thank you. So I would suggest that perhaps we take a 5-minute recess, moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Marsh. All those in favor? We'll just take a brief recess. We don't need to buffer the video. We can just leave it on pause perhaps, or running.
Mr. Chair, this
may have to reconvene this. We're going to have to do, or is there anything from the closed committee of the whole that needs to go to the board today? Yes. Well, 1:30, yeah, so I'm going to suggest we deal with the item that we have before us, and then we're only going to have a short time for lunch, and then we'll have to come back to this meeting and the closed session of Committee of the Whole at 1 o'clock and try and power through that for our 1:30 board, because items on our closed and our open are required for our board meeting at 1:30, or we work right through lunch. So, this is the curse of items that take longer than anticipated. So, thank you. So if we've got everybody back, it looks like we'll resume now and then perhaps even just take a short break till 12:30 for lunch, and then have to power through the rest of this agenda before our 1:30 board meeting. So we're back on the first new business item, which is the bylaw, which is, as noted by Mr. Manhouse in reading it, mostly sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily just clerical, but accuracy updates from the province based on their policies and procedures. Is the motion on the floor? No. Okay, so I'll go back to my list. I have Director Martman next, and then Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. And through the staff, I know these aren't made published yet. So just for clarity to the public, could you maybe just explain the importance of Schedule B, for the need to sort of, for the ministry to have this bylaw related to other bylaws?
Yeah, I'll put that back. Mr. Robbins did just explain that, but I'll go back to Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to committee. Yes, the review and the ministry simply wanted an easy reference or a concurrence, if you will, with the existing service established bylaw. So when you take a glance at the new if you will, consolidated service bylaw, you can see what was consolidated into it. And that was just simply for ease with which to understand the evolution of this service bylaw.
And as a result, the Schedule B would form part of the bylaw.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Martman.
Thank you. And so the follow-up to that is the question around particularly the bylaw relating to Area H. And just a process question about that is, if that bylaw came into fruition because Area H voted for that?
Mr. Robbins.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity around Director Martman's question, in the Schedule B, the bylaw that is related to services provided to Area H, is that what you're asking about?
That's correct. That's under Frank Jameson.
And they would have been gone through a similar process when they originally came to establish those services.
Yeah, it went through the service establishment bylaw formation process, just like every regional district service.
Sorry, that's the process I was asking about. Thank you. But which is what?
Consent of the electorate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further discussion? We still don't have the resolutions on the floor. Director Morrison was next.
Move the recommended resolution.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Director Kuhn, and discussion. See Director Smith.
Thank you. I just have a question possibly for staff on Schedule B. Under the Cowichan Lake Arena, that bylaw is going to remain for the Cowichan area because it has under it their community centers. So is the Schedule B indicating that all of these bylaws are now being put under the new bylaw for regional recreation, yet that bylaw needs to remain for the other services that fall under it? Can you please explain that?
I see Mr. Elzinga and Mr. Robbins. I'll go to Mr. Elzinga first and then Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Smith. So the intent is to assess all of the existing service bylaws in 2 years at the end of the phase-in period to determine which ones can be repealed or amended at that time. So there's no urgency to looking at those bylaws. The intent of the Schedule B to this bylaw is just identifying the services that are in existence today.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. So we still have the other new business item, which is a more detailed discussion on our later board item before it goes to the board. So I'm going to recommend that we take a 30-minute recess. So just before 12:40, if we can come back. I know it's not much time, but we unfortunately have a lot of business to do before our 1:30 p.m. board meeting. And we'll call that recess. Do I need a motion for that? Or can I just do it as the chair?
A motion?
Sure. Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Wilson. All those in favor? Any opposed? 30 minutes starts now, 12:37. We'll see you back here. Thank you.
Put it on because it's cooled off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to say Mr. Robbins was not informed that I take a great issue with his wonderful jacket because it's not mine. And now I have the same beef with Mr. Robbins as I do with Mr. MLA Doug Routley about outdressing the elected official of the home communities. Completely inappropriate and unacceptable.
I'm just trying to keep up with Director Morrison.
Hey, this wasn't about you. He wore the jacket for me.
Right.
Well,
you can't have
yes,
both.
primarily for you, yes, of course. With the thing there too.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, can't you invoke that bylaw that when the legislative services person dresses up, they
Yeah.
have to sing?
Well, apparently
they have to sing every time they speak?
We sent it to the province and they rejected it. So apparently that's not through our legislative power.
Hey.
So I did what I could.
Hey.
All right, I'll take it
Oh,
off.
fair there, dude.
I'm gonna actually take it off because I'm still warm.
Well, a little levity helps the medicine go down, and the medicine on our agenda is the continuing discussion about our referendum question, I believe, Mr. Robbins, that's what we're on to, which was new business item 2? Or did we call the question on new business
Let
item
me just
1?
check with the recording secretary. That's correct. We're on business item 2, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So new business item 2, Mr. Robbins.
And you will have to reference your regular board package. In the bylaws section, there is a bylaw on the referendum question that's before the board later for readings and adoption. Director Salmon had asked that you look at this in committee and have discussion with respect to that question prior to the regular board meeting consideration.
Thank you. So we'll begin that discussion, and I'll turn it over to Director Salmon. And Blaze, I just want to apologize for not calling you back. I got your voicemail this morning while I was en route here, so thank you, and hopefully we honored your request by getting this discussion here, so please take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just did email the board with the wording on that ballot questions in case you're having trouble looking it up. Yeah, so my basic thing is that I think we could improve this and wanted to discuss it here in committee a little bit before it comes up later today in the bylaw at the end of a board meeting. Because I think you look at it, to me, it's remarkably uninformative, that question, and it really doesn't address the gist of what the change we're asking for. The usage-based model is not mentioned at all, and neither is the cost. So both of those, I think, are kind of key to properly informing the electorate what they're voting on and what the effect of it is. Now, I know we're having a communication program and et cetera to go with it, but the reality is only so many people will really see that, and everyone who votes will see this question. So I think it's important we make this question as clear and as informative as we can. And maybe as a bit more background, I also sent around a list. I did a bit of research on past referendum questions, last two provincial elections. The links I sent, but basically the gist of it, I went through and counted. There were 107 questions. Only 8 of them did not have some sort of cost figure in there, whether it was an overall cost or a per thousand cost. So they're almost all informing the electorate of what the cost is. Our proposed one does not do that, despite the fact that it really, apparently, according to the BC Local Elections Manual, it's recommended that we do that if possible. So I guess my question is kind of why would we not do that, since it's the norm, and it just seems like good practice to let everyone know both the gist of it, that we're proposing a usage-based model, and some idea that it's going to cost. I mean, right now you look at that question, to me it really doesn't tell you anything. You kind of read through, and it's a bylaw to support these 9 recreation centers that people will recognize that we know we already have. So what are we asking people? Is it to keep supporting these centers? Are we going to cut funding if we say no, or why are we bringing this forward? I really think we should try to do a little better on the wording of this ballot question.
Thank you, and I believe that staff have taken that advice. Mr. Elzinga, I saw that you pop up there. Did you want to comment on perhaps suggested amended wording for the question, or please go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard through Director Salmon. Thank you very much for the questions. So there seems to be 2. And the one about cost, the challenge, of course, is that it's a different cost for each jurisdiction. And we have one referendum question across the entire region, assuming the bylaw gets adopted. But there is different cost implications for each jurisdiction. I just put that out there as a challenge.
Thank you. I note that Ms. Robbins did provide me just a note here of suggested additional wording to the existing question. The question that you emailed, Blaze, is the present one. I didn't see any suggested amendments to it, but I just wanted to read this out. That after where it says Shawnigan Lake Community Center, the next part says, and permit the CVRD to annually requisition a maximum of the greater of $35 million or an amount equal to the amount that could be raised by a property tax rate of 1.1954 per $1,000 of net taxable value of land and improvements in support of this service. But that, I think, addresses the cost piece, but not the usage-based model piece. And this would be based on a usage-based model. I'm not sure I would put that through to staff, but also reflecting on Director Salmon's comments.
Mr. Chair, certainly that additional wording could be added with respect to as Director Salmon alludes to, the purpose. And that simple wording that you just said could certainly be included in that ballot question, in the ballot question bylaw.
Thank you. And Director Salmon, before I go to Director Wilson, did you want to comment on that feedback? Or is that starting to get closer in your mind?
Yeah, that to me is an improvement. I didn't catch that the cost part now seems to be there. That Mr. Robbins, did you say the usage part wasn't there? It could be.
Go ahead, Mr. Robbins.
Through the chair, it certainly could be there, and the chair did provide a very brief sentence that could be added on to it. I'm not sure that we captured it specifically.
I'm writing it down.
But he's writing it down now.
So if I might to the committee, I'm saying a couple things here. One would be obviously the first part of the question, then we go into the $35 million or amount equal to amount that could be raised by a property tax rate of 1.1954 per $1,000 of next taxable land and improvements in support of the service. This would be based on a facility usage analysis or a facility usage. I'm just trying to take down some bullet points that perhaps staff could work into a more coherent question that could be adopted by the board this afternoon. But I'm just wondering if we're covering those bases or if we're still missing something. And I'll go to the speakers on the list here shortly. Just finding myself back on my list here. So I did see other hands. Sorry, can you just put them up again, folks? I got Director Salmon, Morrison, and Marsh. Did I miss anyone else? Okay, Director Salmon? Oh, sorry, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, so is Director Salmon finished? Are you finished, please?
I can wait till I've spoken already.
Yeah, all these words being thrown in all over the place, the question is getting longer and longer and longer. Let's keep it concise here. And as far as the usage-based in there, I could suggest that the question becomes Establishment Bylaw 2022 to establish a usage-based regional recreation services. You only need to put those two words in right there. Rather than the great long thing that you just suggested, Aaron.
Thank you. I was just tacking that on the end, just a few sentences, but that's a better place to put it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so we've got usage-based, we've got the amount per 1,000 taxable value and the total amount. What else do we want in that question without making it too long? I do on my speakers. Go ahead.
Rather than just usage-based, area usage-based, because it is an area usage-based. Yeah.
Thank you. I have Directors Morrison, Marsh, and then back to Director Salmon on my second round list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm, as a believer in the keep it simple, silly rule, I don't want to really add, but I think, and I don't know whether it was in there, but I think a reviewable usage-based model might be germane to the question.
Thank you very much. Next on my speakers list, I have Directors Marsh, and then round two starts with Director Salmon. But I think we're getting close to at least the framework, and then we can get staff to bring something to our board discussion that might be a good, concise, workable one that includes those details. Director Marsh.
So I'm going to repeat a couple details because that's what I wrote. To replace current funding, I think it's important that people realize this is not an additional something that's going to show up on their tax bill, and that it's based on, however, an area usage reflecting each community or something like that. But I think it's really important to say it replaces the current funding, particularly if the board wants to say up to $35 million, because that's a big number. And so.
Thank you. Good point. Director Salmon, we're starting around. Oh, Director Smith.
So current funding is kind of all over the map for every area. You know, I know that Area H and Area G, we only currently pay into one facility. So now we're going to pay into sort of 9 facilities. So the the word current is, I don't feel that it's the correct word in there, because it's not replacing.
Existing.
It's definitely adding.
To those who have underpaid historically, yes, absolutely.
I know, and I apologize that Area G has underpaid, and we were hoping that we would resolve that sooner. But, you know, I know that's always going to be a bit of a sore point between us, Aaron.
Not at all. More, I shouldn't say, and those who've overpaid, like the Cowichan Lake area. But let's not go there. Let's not go. We're trying to just finalize the question, but I think that's a good point. We might want to say that, like, the word, maybe there's a better word in the thesaurus than replace, like, something about, we'll work on it, but I'm just trying to make sure we hit the high points, and then staff have to kind of look at it through that lens of legislative responsibility and stuff and try and bring us something concise, but I think we're getting to some good points. So I started to go to round two, but then Klaus jumped on Director Kuhn, with all due respect, sir, you're up next.
Well, I'm just so delighted you respect me, man. That's great.
I wish you were here so I could hug you.
I'm wondering, I can see there's some concern about having a lack of proper explanation that maybe some people, especially the areas where there is going to be an increase in total payment, that they might just say, oh, well, that's not to our benefit, so we don't want this, and because it's never really been properly explained why this whole thing is taking place. And I wonder, to put it all in a bylaw, or to put it all in a sentence or a few sentences that gets presented at the voting time. I wonder if there's another way to do that, to inform the public, and it doesn't have to be a lot of explanation, but just to make the public aware of the fact that in the past there were some areas that benefited from certain services but didn't pay properly for it, and vice versa. So that people understand why this whole thing is being done. I don't try to make it too complicated, but my fear is if some people just look at this and say, well, yeah, I mean, we're going to pay an awful lot more. We're not going to do that. We might end up in quite a quandary at voting time, because a lot of effort has gone into this now, and if we don't get the voting, it'll be an awful lot of time and effort wasted, and so as one of the sense, for instance, is to alleviate past injustice or something like that. I just feel we have to be really careful to explain that properly, because if we don't do it properly, there might be a whole bunch of misunderstanding. Anyway, that's my concern.
Thank you. I just want, Director Salmon, I have you first on round two. Just folks who haven't spoken yet keep popping up. I will say, and Ms. Robbins can correct me, but I think we have to, in the question itself, I think we're recommended to stay away from suggestive wording. In other words, saying something was inequitable or unfair in a referendum question would sort of be too much of a push to accept, but I would put that through to Mr. Robbins.
Mr. Chair, you're right on, and that's the best practice, is to avoid that kind of language.
Even saying something like equitable funding model based on usage might be pushing it with the word equitable. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's the challenge, is that we really have to rely on the communication strategy to really fill in those gaps for the majority of our electorate. Sorry. My apologies, Director Manhas hasn't spoken on this item yet, and then I've got Director Salmon and Morrison, I believe, on round two.
I just got a quick question. Thank you, Chair. I just got a quick question. This a weighted vote, or is one person, one vote?
We're at committee now, so if we did a vote in committee, it would be one person, one vote.
Not here, I'm talking about the referendum itself.
Oh, the referendum is one person, one vote regionally. Yeah.
I'd have to go back to your board, because there is one bylaw before you that, and it could be the referendum question that requires your 2/3 of the board. Let me just check that.
Sorry, just to be clear, are you talking about when the referendum's out in the community or at the board table?
No, not the board table, but at the community itself.
At community level, it's one vote per elector.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Did I miss anybody on round one before I go to round two? Doesn't mean you can't come in late as a round one or on round two, but I'll go to round two. I have Director Salmon and Morrison.
Thank you. So given the time, I think I'll move this. So I just emailed it. I'll read it too, but I included the usage-based. We talked about that phrase, and then the cost, I just put at the end, just following the model, that the LGMA model. So I'd like to move this. Are you in favor of the Cowichan Valley Regional District adopting CVRD bylaw 4438 Regional Recreation Funding Services Establishment Bylaw 2022 to establish regional recreational services to fund the usage-based costs of 9 regionally significant recreation facilities that include, I won't read them all, we all know those, ending with Shawnigan Lake Community Center, and annually requisition the greater up to 35 million or an amount equal to the amount that could be raised by a property tax rate of 1.954 per thousand of net taxable value of land improvements within the service area to fund the service. I'd like to move that, please.
That's been moved, but I just got the email and I saw then Director Marsh also sent some suggested wording. There has been a motion made, so procedurally, do we have a seconder for the motion?
Director Wilson.
Are you seconding that? Okay. So I did note that there was a couple things from our discussion that were missing about replacing current funding and that it be usage-based, area-based usage or usage based on area. But we do have that motion on the floor now. So it's up to the committee how to move forward. Discussion on the motion. I have Director Morrison next and then Director Manhas. Director Sari.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll
come right back to you.
Oh, I thought I was next. Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead. So I'm really getting a little anxious here, and that this is really bad practice. Try to draft a resolution or a question on the fly. We shouldn't be crafting the resolution question or the referendum question. We should be giving all of our input to staff. They will make sure that it meets the parameters of an acceptable question, and this is too many cooks. So, I understand there's a resolution on the floor, but I'd be far more comfortable giving this information to staff and having them work on it and bring it back to us for contemplation at when we have this before us at the board. I got the email, but the whole thing didn't come through, and I seem to be missing parts that he'd added at the end. So this procedurally is not a best practice whatsoever.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find my place here, but I do have Mr. Robbins would like to speak to this.
Mr. Chair, if I might help the committee, we've been jotting down all the notes. We appreciate the communications and to help you through this. We'd like the opportunity between now and when this comes up on your board later to craft something for you at that time. You could wordsmith this for a very long time, and you're only changing subtleties with regards to the question. But I think we have a really good sense of where your thought is, and we'll pull out our thesaurus and craft something for you for distribution for the next meeting, if that's okay.
I've got a speakers list here. I have Director Wilson. and Director Sari, and then I will come back to you, Director Salmon.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chair, just in case it matters, I'm happy with what Mr. Robbins
Yeah, and so once everybody spoke, my suggestion was going to be that we just highlight what the key points that we want in that question are and refer it to staff. I'm noting that it's 1 o'clock. We have to start that very same regular board meeting at 1:30, and then we actually have closed session items that are also supposed to be going to the board's meeting later today. So we're running really against time and giving time to staff to craft that question for approval by the board. So my suggestion would be, and this is no disrespect to the motion that's on the floor, but that it be defeated and that we refer this item, and I'll highlight the areas, the pieces we want in the referendum question, and if there's agreement, that we would make that referral to staff to bring back to the board meeting. So does the speakers on my speakers list want to speak to this motion? I have Directors Wilson and Sari and Manhas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the intent of what you've just said there. I would ask that question be posed to Director Salmon, as he is the one that's been brought forward. Is he agreeable with that, asking for a defeat here?
Sorry,
yes.
I think he just said that he was. Yeah. Director Sari?
I'm agreeable as well. I would just like it in writing to alternates as well included. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So Directors Manhas and Sari will also be included in that resolution. So I'm going to call the question that's on the floor, which I think it sounds like we're going to defeat, and then we're going to refer this item with a couple items that we'll highlight to staff for the wording. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? All opposed. The motion is defeated, I believe. I was opposed as well. I didn't raise my hand, sorry. Didn't want to be the only one voting in favor. The items that I think we already have the inclusion from staff of the funding amounts. So the 35 million, 1.194 per thousand of next taxable value, et cetera. That it's replacing current funding, that it's usage-based per area, and it is reviewable or reviewed on a cycle if possible. And did we miss anything that we wish to have in the referendum question that isn't already there? Director Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think reviewable, just leave it reviewable, because if you leave it an annual base, I think that's way too soon on a, especially a
Yeah, it wasn't annual.
magnitude
Thank
of
you.
this.
Mr. Robbins.
When we bring this back, you can't fetter any future board by suggesting that you review it, and that would be a discretion of a future board, and you wouldn't want to embed it.
So it's a policy piece that we review, but we can't put that into the question. Okay, thank you.
Move that referral motion.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder on the referral? This is to staff to bring back to tonight's board meeting, or this afternoon's, or just a few minutes from now, seconded by Director Manhas. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Sari opposed? Or was that just late? No, just late. Sorry, it's just delayed on my side. Okay, so I think we're good on that. Does that take us to the conclusion of our regular agenda?
It does, Mr. Chair.
Yes, question period. Mr. Robbins.
And we have no one in the gallery, and I'm not aware of anybody joining us electronically to pose any questions.
So we'd ask for then a motion to go into closed session. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. All those in favor? Any opposed? None